No matter what Fallout game you play, the Maxson name will make an appearance, whether it be in a diary or holotape, in the flesh, or mentioned by someone else. It is a name belonging to those who created and maintained one of the most influential and well-known factions in Fallout, but not many people know the history of the Maxson family, a family which starts with Roger Maxson. Before the Great War, Roger Maxson was a captain serving in the United States Armed Forces. He fought during the Resource Wars, but unlike those who fought right up until the Great War, Roger Maxson was instead selected to be a part of an ultra-secret team, which ultimately saved his life and the lives of his family. In 2076, the NBC division of Westech, while trying to cure the new plague, discovered the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV, and the United States Department of Defense, desperate to keep this discovery a secret, built Mariposa, a brand new military base in California, and the virus, and the research, and the scientists were all taken to this base, and to keep it all safe was a team of highly skilled soldiers. The most notable members are Colonel Robert Spindle, the commander, and Captain Roger Maxson, the second in command. For several months, the soldiers, under the leadership of Colonel Spindle, guarded the project, unaware of what the virus was and how it was supposed to be used to help win the war. But on October 10, 2077, a soldier discovered the true nature of the project when he witnessed the scientists experimenting on humans, specifically prisoners of war. Roger Maxson couldn't believe the US government would treat soldiers, even enemy ones, so poorly. The only logical explanation he could think of was the scientists were illegally testing on humans without the government's knowledge, and as such, they needed to be stopped. Colonel Spindle, unable to process the situation, had a nervous breakdown and locked himself inside his office and refused to open the door. Meanwhile, Captain Maxson was left to handle the situation, which was no easy feat, considering the soldiers were now out for blood. And not 2 days later, Roger had to pull rank to stop one of his men from executing a scientist. The situation was clearly deteriorating, and Roger knew that in order to control the outcome, he needed to know exactly what the scientists were doing, and so he ordered his team to round them up, and one by one they were interrogated, starting with Robert Anderson, the chief of the research team. Anderson explained that the testing at the facility was actually authorized by the government, but Maxson refused to believe they would do such a thing, and unwilling to listen to any more of Anderson's outrageous claims, he shot Anderson to death. His body was left to rot in the corner of the room to show the other scientists what would happen to them if they failed to tell him the truth. 5 days after Colonel Spindle locked himself away, the door to his office was pried open, but as soon as they entered, the commander committed suicide. Many attempts were made to contact the outside world to get answers from the government, but they never replied. Over the coming days, the remaining scientists were interrogated and executed. Their bodies slowly filled the room with the stench of death, but every last one of them insisted that they had been ordered to experiment on humans by the government. And Roger was almost convinced it was true, but until he heard the words coming from someone truly in charge, from someone who made orders, not followed them, he wouldn't believe it. As a last-ditch effort to force the government to respond to their situation, Roger declared that his unit had withdrawn from the United States and from there on would be acting independently. Yet even that claim, false as it was met with silence. And then Roger had a startling realization. He knew that his messages were getting through, and with his declaration of independence, his family and the families of his men had just become targets, traitors by association. So Roger made a bold choice. He sent his unit to find their families, and once they had, to bring them back to Mariposa where they would be safe, sheltered from US forces until the situation was resolved. However, on October 23, 2077, a week or so after their families had arrived at Mariposa, there was a pivotal moment in Maxson's investigation. Leon von Felden, a scientist with the highest corporate clearance, contacted Roger from the Westech research facility, the place where FEV had been discovered, and now Roger, at long last, could get some answers. But to his horror, von Felden told him the exact same thing the other scientists had. Then, before Roger could ask another question, the line went dead. But in that moment, Roger realized that he believed Felden and the scientists he had killed had been telling the truth all along. Having come to the realization, Roger informed the soldiers of what was going on. He told them the government had authorized the use of prisoners of war for human testing, and that was why they hadn't answered his calls or responded to his declaration of independence. The government just couldn't admit to what they were doing. As for the very sudden and abrupt communication troubles with Felden, that wasn't the result of government interference, but nuclear war, meaning Westech had been targeted by enemy warheads and Felden was now dead. For whatever reason, Mariposa was still standing, but it was only a matter of time until China made up for their oversight. Therefore, the base was no longer safe, and they needed to leave before the next exchange could kill them. 2 days later, Sergeant Plattner volunteered to monitor the radiation levels outside, and to his delight, the fallout hadn't yet reached their location, meaning their families, who didn't have power armor or environmental suits, could go outside without worrying about the radiation. And with the knowledge that it was safe, Roger told the others to pack up and get some rest, because in the morning they were going outside into the desert and they weren't coming back. The next day, Roger and a few others buried the dead scientists. The base was then sealed, and the exodus to Lost Hills, an old government bunker somewhere southeast, was underway. Over the next few weeks, the group experienced many casualties. While the soldiers enjoyed the protection afforded by their T-51B power armor, their families were exposed, and any raider that happened to see the group always targeted the weakest members. The adults without power armor and the children. And despite their technological advantage, for every 2 raiders the soldiers managed to kill, they lost one of their own. And to make matters worse, halfway through the journey, Sergeant Allen and a few others, Jensen, Soto, and Camarillo, decided to break away from the main group to go to Westech in search of useful technology. Suffice to say, they didn't make it back, and Roger never did learn what happened to them. Despite this loss, Roger and the remaining members continued southeast, their numbers shrinking with each fight, and by the end of their journey, every last one of them knew what it was like to lose someone they loved, including Roger, who lost his wife. But in the end, they found the bunker empty and claimed it as their own. Once they were settled, Maxson declared that the United States had failed to protect its citizens and stated that they must form a new order to preserve what was left of civilization, a Brotherhood of Steel. At first, the Brotherhood focused on aiding survivors, but quickly transitioned into gathering and preserving technology. The reason for this change came with the realization that humanity's collective knowledge was at risk of being lost. So to prevent that from happening, Roger decided to dedicate the order to the preservation of technology and human knowledge, collecting it so the Brotherhood might one day be able to rebuild humanity. Shortly after the creation of the Order, Maxson used a communication satellite to contact other army units across the country. One such unit, based in Appalachia, was led by a woman who had actually served under Roger Maxson during the Sino-American War, Elizabeth Taggarty, and she was more than happy to join his cause, but she didn't fully understand why they needed to change who they were. Maxson explained that this change was to create a new identity, both as a way of returning meaning to their lives and to immunize themselves from the old, as well as any new government that may emerge. Even though Taggarty did not initially believe in the cause, she accepted her new orders and transformed her surviving soldiers into the Order's first regional chapter. But one day, Taggarty relayed to Maxson information of a new threat, the Scorched Plague, a mutagenic disease that infected anything it touched. But all Maxson could do was advise setting up kill zones to lure the Scorched into, which only delayed the inevitable. Elizabeth pleaded with Maxson to grant her chapter permission to use nuclear weapons against the Scorch Beasts, but was forbidden from doing so because Maxson found the idea of using nuclear weapons, even to help fight the Scorch Beasts, to be morally abhorrent. To further damage the world using the same weapons that had almost destroyed it was an insult to the small amount of life that was left. Maxson maintained communications with Taggart until the satellite burned in the atmosphere, which ended their contact. In his last transmission, Roger assured Taggart of his complete trust in her leadership and promised to send help as soon as he could, although by the time that help arrived, it was already too late. In the end, Roger would die of cancer in 2135, and by then, he was this legendary figure known to all members of the Brotherhood as the Great Deliverer, a title not many could match, and the only one worthy of filling his boots was his son, Maxson II. Born in the 2060s, Maxson II was just a teenager when the world was destroyed. He survived thanks to his father taking him to Mariposa, but from there on, his life would only become ever more traumatic and challenging. During the exodus to the Lost Hills bunker, his mother was killed by marauders, and this likely led to him not wanting to lose anyone else, as unlike his father, he wanted to seal the bunker and leave the rest of the world to fend for itself. But his father, Roger, was adamant that while the Brotherhood needed to collect and pool knowledge and technology for future generations, they also needed to work with others outside of their ranks. A task Maxson II unwillingly continued, and over the years he ascended the ranks from Knight to Paladin, and with his father's death, he became the second High Elder at 60 years old, and then led the Brotherhood for another 3 decades. In 2155, at 90 years old, he was leading a scout unit to track down a warband of vipers, a mad cult that worshipped snakes. His elderly frame, supported by power armor, was enough to continue fighting the Brotherhood's enemies. But something he failed to realize was that religious zeal and poisoned arrows were, under the right conditions, enough to counter their technological advantage. And Maxson II made his biggest mistake when he removed his helmet for a breath of fresh air. This act provided the Vipers with the perfect opportunity to strike back, and a lucky shot allowed a poisoned arrow to nick his throat, which killed him hours later. Now leaderless, head Paladin Rhombus wanted revenge and unleashed the full force of the Brotherhood against the Vipers, ruthlessly pursuing them across the wasteland until only a few of them were left. Those who survived the Brotherhood's scourge fled into the mountains, and while they remained active, they never posed the same level of threat they once had. And this near extermination became Maxson II's legacy. In addition to ridding California of Vipers almost entirely, they also discovered the Hub, a struggling trading center in its formative years, and seeing the benefit of having a friendly settlement to trade with, they established full trade relations which allowed both Lost Hills and the Hub to flourish. But with the death of Maxson II, it was time for a new High Elder. Only this time, there wasn't anyone qualified to take the position, although Maxson II did have a son, John Maxson. John was 58 when his father died, but the Elder Council, those basically in charge, were unsure as to whether or not he was ready to lead the Brotherhood. So instead of becoming High Elder, he was promoted to the Elder Council in preparation to one day lead the Brotherhood as High Elder. And this is the first instance we see that simply having the Maxson name isn't enough to be promoted straight to High Elder. Instead, you have to prove to the Elder Council that you can lead and make the right decisions for the Brotherhood before you're given the chance to do so. Now John, son of Maxson II, is the first Maxson to be born into the Brotherhood of Steel, and he progressed through the ranks of Initiate, Knight, and Paladin. And during these years, John traveled the wasteland, making contact with other settlements, but through it all, he only made a single friend outside the Order, Butch Harris, the owner of the Fargo Traders. John's final promotion came at the cost of tragedy, the death of his father. But after 4 years of service in the Elder Council, they managed to convince John to accept the position of High Elder, meaning he didn't necessarily want to become High Elder. The role was changing after all, and as the order grew, the level of politics and the time spent inside the bunker increased, which limited his time in the wasteland and reduced the amount of contact he had with his friend Butch. But in the end, John did agree, and in doing so he became the third Maxson to hold the rank of High Elder. Despite the Elder Council having to convince John to take the position in the first place, in later years they started to regret this choice, as John often made claims he couldn't back up, which made him seem crazy at times. One such claim was that somewhere in the north an army was massing. Little did the Elder Council know that John Maxson was right. An army was amassing in the north, an army of mutants created using the same virus his grandfather Roger Maxson once protected. And just as his father, Maxson II, and his grandfather Roger Maxson both achieved great feats, surviving the Great War, creating the Brotherhood of Steel, and killing the Vipers, John Maxson saved the world by helping the Vault Dweller destroy the Master and his mutant army. Whatever happened to John after that is a mystery, but as all living things do, they one day die. And this marks the end of a concise lineage. From here on, we have only a few more Brotherhood members with the Maxson name, but no clear link as to who they got it from, only that they are in some way related to Roger Maxson and his descendants. And I think this is a good time to mention Jeremy Maxson from Van Buren. In 2231, Jeremy was leading a thriving Brotherhood of Steel and decided that it was time to finally expand their operations into the east, something that would actually happen in later games. Jeremy sent an expeditionary force composed of 5 paladins to confirm the location of Peterson's bunker, a pre-war fallout shelter near Hoover Dam built by Senator Todd Peterson so he and his family would survive the war. However, the bunker was never used for its intended purpose, and all members of the family were caught in the Great War, all except for Todd's son, Corporal Ben Schilling, who just so happened to be at Mariposa with Roger Maxson, which saved his life. After Roger Maxson formed the Brotherhood of Steel, Corporal Schilling revealed the location of his father's bunker, and the knowledge was filed away for later use, 154 years later to be precise. The expedition sent by Jeremy Maxson, led by Paladin Brixley, discovered Peterson's bunker, disabled the security, and opened it for habitation, which eventually led to a new chapter being formed. While Van Buren isn't canon, there is another man with the Maxson name that is canon, and that is Jonathan Maxson, not to be confused with John Maxson. Jonathan was a high-ranking paladin who died while serving just outside New California Republic territory. To date, Jonathan is the only Maxson to have a named wife, Jessica Maxson, or Lady Maxson as she is also known. After the death of her husband, Jessica decided it was best to send her son east to be raised under the tutelage of the respected Elder Owen Lyons. There's no mention as to why she couldn't go with her son, only that the Brotherhood were having troubles within their ranks, and the NCR also posed a threat to their existence. Sadly, Jessica joined her husband in death soon after sending her son away. With the mention of internal conflict, I can't help but think that some members of the Brotherhood were perhaps tired of serving the Maxson family and wanted to extinguish the name altogether, and perhaps they are the ones responsible for her death. Either way, her child was now an orphan, and that child is of course Arthur Maxson. Born in 2267, Arthur is the last known descendant of Roger Maxson. Shortly after arriving in the capital wasteland and joining the Brotherhood at the Citadel, he became known to others as a first-rate student, one with excellent knowledge of the Brotherhood's triumphs and history, even learning to recite the Codex by heart, something very few others were able to do. But he was also incredibly lonely. He was the only child at the Citadel and grew up surrounded by adults, hardened soldiers who never showed him kindness or warmth. His closest friend as a child was Liberty Prime, a US Army robot, which led to Scribe Rothschild banning Arthur from the laboratory, emphasizing the senselessness of trying to make friends with a machine, a lesson that would follow Arthur into adulthood. But the closest living person that could be considered his friend was Sentinel Sarah Lyons, Owen's daughter. Maxson saw Sarah as an older sister of sorts, and she taught him how to fight, how to kill, and more importantly, how to lead. Despite his young age, Maxson was faced with high expectations as the last of the Maxson line, a heavy burden for such a small boy. Arthur was expected to become the Brotherhood's great new leader, and was told his soul was forged from eternal steel, a belief Arthur didn't share but allowed others to have as it was good for morale. The key change in Arthur's life was the death of Elder Owen Lyons, who passed away from old age, followed by the death of Sarah Lyons, who fell during combat shortly after. This left their chapter leaderless, and Maxson watched as countless members tried to step up and take control. During this time, Maxson rapidly developed his talents, intending to fill the position himself and live up to his family name. And this intention led to several grand accomplishments. At 12 years old, Arthur managed to kill 2 raiders on a training patrol, saving the squad that was supposed to escort him. A year later, Arthur managed to single-handedly kill a Deathclaw, taking grave wounds in the process, which did disfigure his face, but that scar served as a reminder to anyone who saw him, this 13-year-old boy, that what they were looking at wasn't just a child, but a warrior with Maxson blood coursing through his veins. A couple of years later, Arthur topped his reputation by putting an end to the new super mutant threat when he killed Shepard, the super mutant leader, a feat which showed those who may have still doubted him that killing a Deathclaw single-handedly wasn't just luck, and that he truly was a great warrior. And they weren't the only ones who started to believe this, because after the death of Shepard, the West Coast Brotherhood actually contacted the Citadel and revealed they had been watching him all this time. And Arthur was finally ready to become a provisional elder. Though Maxson was still young, barely in his teens, he was ready to lead and reunite the fragmented Brotherhood forces, and in 2283 he did just that, by brokering a peace deal with the Brotherhood outcasts and reintegrating them back into the chapter they had once abandoned. And with that, Maxson had proven himself to be both a great fighter and a brilliant diplomat, and the elders back west were satisfied with his work and made him a fully fledged elder at 16 years old, the youngest elder the Order had ever seen. But Maxson was only just getting started. In times past, the Brotherhood once made use of airships to travel across the wasteland, taking their base with them and striking from the skies. Not long before the death of Owen Lyons, the sharpest minds of the chapter spent 2 years designing an airship and 2 more years gathering the parts to build one. By using advanced Enclave technology recovered from Adams Air Force Base, and a fusion plant pulled from an aircraft carrier, some believe Rivet City, the Brotherhood was able to build the Prydwen, a vast aircraft carrier with its own clinic, armory, barracks, various workshops, research facilities, vertibird fleet, and more. And it was launched in 2282, a year before Arthur became elder, so it was only natural for the young boy to add it to his growing arsenal. And with this new mobile command center and the Brotherhood's full support, Arthur's reign in the capital wasteland was unquestioned, and within 3 years of becoming elder, Arthur now had the power to detect and investigate dangerous technologies on a greater scale, like the unusual heat signature in the Commonwealth. And thanks to his tenacity and singular vision, the men that serve under his command do so with pride, with one soldier mentioning they were ready to invade hell itself, if that is what Arthur wanted. In regards to what Arthur actually wants, seems to be a combination between the traditional Brotherhood approach of recovering and preserving technology, but much like his tutor, Elder Owen Lyons, Arthur has also made a bit of a habit of not just working with outsiders, but using technology to keep them safe, something the Council of Elders considers to be unorthodox. But since Arthur has achieved so much in so little time, they are willing to make exceptions for now. As to what happened to Arthur during his time in the Commonwealth has yet to be seen. And that's it. We don't know of any other Maxson family member There's no mention of Arthur having any children to continue his bloodline, so if in Fallout 4 the canon ending does have Arthur being killed by the sole survivor, then that would mean the Maxson family is no more. Be sure to show your support by liking the video and subscribing if you haven't already for more Fallout content. If there's anything you'd like to see in a later video, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. With that said, thank you, as always, for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.